The night was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that settled over a village after a long day of work. This was different. Heavy. Uneasy. The kind of silence that made even the wind seem like it was holding its breath. Ronan noticed it the moment he stepped outside his small farmhouse. The moon hung low behind thin clouds, casting a pale glow over the fields. His crops swayed gently in the night breeze, and the distant tree lines stood dark and still against the horizon. Everything looked normal, but something felt wrong. Ronan frowned and adjusted the lantern in his hand. Probably nothing, he muttered. It had been a long day, the kind that left his muscles aching and his mind tired. He had spent hours repairing a broken fence on the far side of his land, and all he wanted now was sleep. Still, that feeling wouldn't go away. Then he heard it. A sound, faint, from the direction of the barn. Ronan froze. He listened carefully. At first, there was nothing. Then, a soft thud, like something shifting in the hay. Ronan's grip tightened on the lantern. Probably a stray animal, he said under his breath. That happens sometimes. Foxes, wild dogs. Once, even a deer had wandered into his barn looking for shelter. Still, something about the sound didn't feel right. It wasn't random. It was controlled, deliberate. Ronan set the lantern on a fence post and grabbed the old wooden pitchfork leaning against the wall of his house. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's see what you are." He walked slowly across the yard toward the barn. Each step felt louder than it should. The dirt crunched beneath his boots, and the wind whispered through the wooden planks of the barn as he approached. The large doors were slightly open. He was sure he had closed them earlier. Ronan stopped a few feet away. The uneasy feeling in his chest grew stronger. "Hello," he called out. No answer. He pushed the door open. The hinges creaked loudly in the silence. Inside, the barn was dark except for thin beams of moonlight slipping through the gaps in the wood. Stacks of hay lined the walls, and the faint smell of straw and dust filled the air. Ronan stepped inside slowly, lifting the pitchfork slightly. "All right," he said again. "I know something's in here." For a moment, nothing moved. Then, a shadow shifted. Near the far corner, Ronan's heart jumped. "Show yourself," he said firmly. The shadow didn't move, but he could hear it now. Breathing. Slow. Uneven. Not an animal. Something bigger. Ronan took a cautious step forward. Then another. The lantern light from outside barely reached the corner, but it was enough to reveal a shape. A figure, curled against the hay. Still, Ronan swallowed. "Hey," he said. No response. He stepped closer. The figure shifted slightly, and then he saw it. Green skin, sharp tusks, dark hair tangled with dirt and dried blood. Ronan froze. No, an orc. Every story he had ever heard came rushing back at once. Raids, war, burned villages. Orcs weren't travelers. They were fighters, enemies. The figure stirred again. A low, strained breath escaped her lips. She was alive. Barely. Ronan stared at her. If anyone in the village found out about this, they wouldn't ask questions. They would kill her, and maybe him too for hiding her. The safest choice was obvious. Walk away. Pretend he never saw anything. Let the night take care of the problem. Ronan tightened his grip on the pitchfork. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then the orc shifted again. A faint, broken sound escaped her throat. Pain. Real. Raw. Human. Ronan exhaled slowly. "Well," he muttered, "this is a terrible idea." He lowered the pitchfork. Carefully, he stepped closer. "You picked the wrong barn," he said quietly. Then he knelt beside her. And in that moment, everything changed. Because far beyond the quiet fields, war drums were already beginning to sound. For a long moment after kneeling beside her, Ronan didn't move. The barn felt smaller now, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. The orc woman lay curled in the hay, her breathing uneven, her body trembling faintly, as if even the act of staying alive was a battle she was barely winning. Up close, she looked worse. Much worse. Her armor was broken in several places, leather straps torn and hanging loose, metal plates dented inward, as if something had struck her with brutal force. Blood had dried along her side and shoulder, dark against her green skin. Someone hadn't just fought her. They had tried to kill her. Ronan swallowed. "Yeah, this is bad." The orc stirred slightly, her hand twitching weakly against the hay. Her eyes opened just a fraction, enough for him to see a flash of amber. Sharp, alert, even like this, even barely conscious. She saw him. For a brief second, Her body tensed as if she was about to fight. Then the strength left her again. Her head fell back against the hay. Ronan let out a slow breath. "Relax," he muttered. "If I was going to kill you, I wouldn't be talking." The words felt strange even as he said them. This wasn't supposed to be happening. Not in his barn. Not in his life. He stood up slowly and took a step back. Think. That's what he needed to do. Think clearly. If the village found out, they would come with torches and weapons before sunrise. Orcs were not something people debated about. They were enemies. Always had been. Always would be. And yet, he looked down at her again. She didn't look like a threat. Not like this. She looked like someone who had run out of strength. Ronan rubbed the back of his neck. "All right," he said quietly. "Options." He started pacing slowly across the barn. "I walk away, close the door, pretend I didn't see anything." He stopped. Looked back at her. She didn't move. "I go to the village, tell them there's an orc here." He winced slightly. "Yeah, that ends badly." He exhaled. Or, he looked around the barn. The hay. The tools. The old blankets hanging near the back wall. "I help her." The idea settled in the air like something dangerous. Ronan laughed quietly. "That's the worst option." And yet, he walked back to her anyway. "Yeah," he muttered. "Definitely the worst option." Carefully, he knelt again and checked the wound at her side. It was deep. Too deep to ignore. If he left her like this, she wouldn't last the night. Ronan shook his head. "You've got terrible timing," he said. He stood and moved quickly, grabbing a bucket. A cloth. One of the old blankets. His hands moved without thinking now, the way they always did when something on the farm needed fixing. Except this time, he wasn't fixing a fence. He returned and knelt beside her again. "All right," he said. "This is going to hurt." She didn't respond. But when the cold water touched the wound, her body reacted instantly. Her hand shot up, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. Ronan flinched. "Easy." Her eyes opened fully now. "Amber. Burning." "Why?" she rasped. "Why are you helping me?" Ronan didn't pull away. "Because you're bleeding in my barn." "That is not a reason." "It is to me." Her grip tightened slightly. "You should let me die?" Ronan frowned. "That seems dramatic. You do not understand what is coming." "Probably not." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They are hunting me." Ronan glanced toward the barn doors. "Yeah, I had a feeling." Her eyes locked onto his. "If they find me here." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ronan understood. He slowly pulled his wrist free. "Well," he said, "I guess we'll try not to let that happen." The orc stared at him, confused, suspicious, and for the first time, slightly uncertain. Outside the barn, the night remained silent. But far beyond the fields, the war drums were getting closer. The barn felt colder after her words. "They are hunting me." Ronan sat back on his heels, the damp cloth still in his hand, watching her more carefully now. The flicker of lantern light from outside barely reached the corner where they sat, leaving most of her face in shadow, but her eyes, those he could see clearly, amber, sharp, and for the first time, afraid. Not the loud, desperate kind of fear. Something quieter, controlled. The kind of fear that came from knowing exactly what was coming. Ronan leaned back slightly. "Well," he muttered, "that explains the dramatic entrance." She didn't react to the comment. Her gaze had shifted toward the barn doors, her entire body tense despite the injury in her side. "They will follow my trail," she said quietly. Ronan glanced at the ground. Mud. Blood. Footprints leading straight from the fields to his barn. "Yeah," he said. "That's not subtle." Her jaw tightened. "You should send me away." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "You can barely stand." "That will not matter." "It will to me." Her eyes snapped back to him. "You do not understand." "Yeah, you keep saying that." "They will not spare you." Ronan shrugged. "Most things don't." She stared at him. There was something strange in her expression now. Confusion again. Like she couldn't understand why he wasn't reacting the way she expected. "You should be afraid," she said. Ronan thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "I am." That seemed to surprise her more than anything else. "But," he added, "being afraid doesn't mean I stopped doing something." The barn fell quiet. Outside, the wind moved softly through the fields, brushing against the wooden walls with a low whisper. Inside, the only sound was her breathing. Still uneven. Still weak. Ronan reached for the cloth again. "Hold still," he said. She didn't move. But this time, she didn't stop him either. He cleaned the wound more carefully now, wiping away the dried blood and dirt. The cut was deep, running along her side just beneath the broken edge of her armor. "You're lucky," he said. "How?" "It missed anything important." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I do not rely on luck." "Good," Ronan replied. "Because you don't have much of it tonight." For a brief second, something almost like a smile flickered across her face. Then it was gone. Her gaze drifted again toward the barn doors. "They are not ordinary hunters," she said. "Figured. They do not stop." Also figured. "They do not forgive." Ronan nodded slowly. "That sounds inconvenient." She looked back at him. "You joke. Helps me think. They will not be far." Ronan stood and walked toward the barn doors, pushing them open just enough to look outside. The night stretched across the fields, quiet and still under the pale moonlight. Nothing moved. Not yet. But something felt different now, like the silence was waiting. He stepped back inside and closed the door again. "Well," he said, "we've got a little time." "Not much." "Enough." He walked back toward her. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Zara." Ronan nodded. "All right, Zara." She watched him. "You should not say that name out loud." "That important?" "Yes." Ronan scratched his beard. "Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern here." She shifted slightly, wincing again as pain shot through her side. "You still have time to walk away," she said. Ronan looked at her, then around the barn, then back at her again. "Nah," he said. "That window closed the moment I picked up the bucket." Zara stared at him, and for the first time, the fear in her eyes wasn't just for herself. It was for him, because somewhere out in the darkness, the hunt had already begun. The silence inside the barn didn't last long. It changed, subtly at first, a shift in the air, a feeling, the kind that made the hairs on the back of Ronan's neck stand up without any clear reason. He noticed it before he heard anything. Zara noticed it before he even turned his head. "They're closer," she said quietly. Ronan frowned. "You can tell that?" "Yes." "That's not comforting." She didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the barn doors again. Her body tensed despite the pain that clearly ran through her side. Even sitting still seemed to cost her effort now, but she refused to lie down. Ronan crossed his arms. "All right," he said. "Time for some answers." She didn't look at him. "You should not ask questions." "Yeah, I'm definitely asking questions." Silence. "Then, you should not know who I am." "That's exactly why I want to know." Her jaw tightened slightly. "It will make this worse." Ronan gestured around the barn. "There's a wounded orc in my barn, and something is hunting her in the middle of the night." He paused. "I'm pretty sure it's already worse." That made her glance at him. For a moment, their eyes met again. Amber and steady. Tired, but still strong. "You do not understand what is coming," she said. "Then explain it." "I cannot." Ronan let out a slow breath. "That's not helpful." Her gaze hardened slightly. "If you know who I am, you will not be able to walk away." Ronan tilted his head. "I already can't walk away." "You still can." He shook his head. "No." The certainty in his voice caught her off guard. For a brief moment, she didn't respond. Then she looked away again. "You should not have chosen this," she said quietly. Ronan shrugged. "Too late now." The barn creaked softly as the wind brushed against its wooden frame. Outside, the night remained still. Too still. Ronan walked over to the far wall and grabbed another old blanket, bringing it back and draping it over her shoulders. "You're losing heat," he said. She didn't protest, but she didn't thank him either. Her eyes remained distant, focused on something far beyond the barn. "You're not just some random soldier," Ronan said. No answer. "Your armor," he continued. "Your scars. The way you keep looking at the door like you're expecting an army, not a patrol. Still nothing. And now something is tracking you through the night, like it knows exactly where to look." He paused. "You're important." Her hand tightened slightly around the edge of the blanket. "That is not your concern. It became my concern when you walked into my barn." Silence again. Then Ronan noticed something. A faint glint beneath the torn edge of her armor. "Metal." He leaned forward slightly. "What's that?" Her reaction was instant. Her hand moved to cover it. "Nothing." "Yeah, that's definitely something." Before she could stop him, Ronan reached out and pulled the chain free from beneath the leather. A medallion slid into the dim light. Dark iron. Heavy. Engraved with a symbol that made Ronan pause. A crown. Not smooth. Not elegant. Sharp. Wrapped in claw-like shapes. "Yeah," he said slowly. "That's not normal." Her voice dropped. "Give it back." Ronan studied it for a moment longer. then looked at her. You're not just important. She said nothing. You're the reason they're coming. Her eyes met his again, and this time, she didn't deny it. Ronan handed the medallion back. She gripped it tightly. Then, after a long silence, she spoke. I am not a soldier. I figured. I am the one they are searching for. Ronan nodded slowly. Also figured. Her voice grew quieter. I am the last heir of the Iron Throne. The words settled heavily in the air. Ronan blinked once. Of course you are. Outside the barn, a distant sound rolled across the fields. Low, deep, unmistakable. War drums. The war drums didn't stop. They rolled across the dark fields in slow, heavy beats, deep enough to be felt in the chest more than heard with the ears. The sound carried through the night like a warning, echoing over the village rooftops and across the empty farmland surrounding Ronan's barn. He stood still for a moment, listening. Yeah, he muttered. That's definitely not normal. Behind him, Zara didn't move. Her grip tightened slightly around the iron medallion, her eyes fixed on the barn doors as if she could see through them. They are closer than I thought, she said quietly. Ronan glanced back. You said that before. This time, I am certain. The drums continued. Slow, steady, relentless. Ronan walked toward the barn doors and pushed one open just enough to look outside. The night had changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was tense. The village lights flickered in the distance, and a few windows had begun to glow as people woke from the sound of the drums. Shadows moved between houses as villagers stepped outside, trying to understand what was happening. Then Ronan saw it. Movement. Far across the road that led into the village. Torches. Dozens of them. No. More. They moved like a river of fire cutting through the darkness. Riders. Fast. Organized. Coming straight toward the village. Well, Ronan said under his breath, that answers that. He closed the door and turned back toward Zara. You've got visitors. I know. Friends or enemies? Her answer came without hesitation. Both. Ronan raised an eyebrow. That's not helpful. They are searching for me, she said. But not all who search serve the same purpose. Meaning, some will protect me. And the others? They will kill me. Ronan exhaled slowly. Great. That really narrows things down. Outside, the drums grew louder. The torches drew closer. The village had fully awakened now. Voices echoed faintly across the fields as people gathered near the road, trying to see what was coming. Ronan paced once across the barn. All right, he said. We need a plan. There is no plan, Zara replied. That's not how I like to do things. You cannot hide me from this. Ronan stopped, then looked at her. You'd be surprised. She frowned slightly. You do not understand the scale of what is coming. Big army. Lots of weapons. Very angry people. Got it. You joke again. Still helps me think. The sound of hooves reached the barn now. Closer. Fast. The riders were entering the village. Ronan moved quickly. He grabbed a pile of loose hay and began pulling it toward the far corner of the barn. What are you doing? Zara asked. Hiding you. That will not work. It doesn't have to work forever. He piled the hay around her, creating a rough cover, then threw the old blanket over the top. Stay still, he said. She grabbed his wrist again. Stronger this time. You should leave, she said. Ronan shook his head. Too late for that. The sound of hooves stopped outside. Voices followed. Loud. Commanding. A hard knock slammed against the barn door. Ronan froze, then slowly turned toward it. Open up, a voice shouted. Ronan took a deep breath, then walked toward the door. Behind him, hidden beneath hay and shadow, the heir to the Iron Throne held her breath. And outside, the hunters had arrived. The knock came again, harder this time. The wooden doors rattled under the force. Open the barn, the voice demanded. Ronan stood still for half a second longer, steadying his breath. Then he moved. He unlatched the door and pulled it open just enough to step outside, blocking the entrance with his body. Cold night air rushed in, and so did the presence of soldiers. 5 of them stood in front of him, armored, armed, mounted on massive war wolves that exhaled clouds of white breath into the cold air. Their armor bore the same sharp, clawed symbol Ronan had seen on Zara's medallion. But something about them felt different. These weren't just soldiers. They were hunters. Their leader stepped forward. He was tall, even for an orc, with broad shoulders and a face marked by old battle scars. His yellow eyes locked onto Ronan instantly, sharp and searching. You own this land? The warrior asked. Ronan nodded. Yeah. You live alone? Yeah. The warrior studied him for a moment longer. Then his gaze shifted past Ronan, toward the darkness inside the barn. We are searching for someone. Ronan crossed his arms. Seems like a popular activity tonight. The other soldiers shifted slightly. The leader didn't smile. A wounded orc passed through this area. Ronan shrugged. Didn't see anyone. The warrior stepped closer. Now he stood only a few feet away. His presence was heavy. Dangerous. You should think carefully before you answer again. Ronan didn't move. I already did. The silence between them stretched. Behind the warrior, one of the others dismounted and began walking slowly around the side of the barn. Ronan noticed. You don't trust me? He asked. No. That's fair. The leader's eyes narrowed slightly. You are calm. Been a long day. You should be afraid. Ronan thought about that for a second. Yeah, he said. Probably. The soldier tilted his head slightly. Yet you are not. Ronan shrugged. Doesn't help much. Behind him, inside the barn, Zara didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't make a sound. The soldiers circling the barn paused near the back wall. Ronan could hear his footsteps. Slow. Careful. Searching. The leader spoke again. If you are hiding her. He let the sentence hang in the air. You will die for it. Ronan met his gaze. That seems extreme. It is war. Ronan nodded slightly. Yeah, I'm starting to see that. Another soldier approached from the side. Nothing out back, he said. The leader didn't look away from Ronan. Search inside. The words hit like a hammer. Ronan stepped slightly forward, blocking the doorway more fully. Barns full of hay and tools, he said. Nothing worth your time. The warrior's expression didn't change. Move. Ronan didn't. For a moment, everything froze. Then, a voice came from behind the soldiers. Stop. Everyone turned. Another rider approached. Slower. Calmer. But somehow more dangerous than all of them. His armor was darker, marked with deeper scars. And when he stepped forward, the others made space for him. His eyes moved past Ronan, into the barn, then back to Ronan again. You spoke to our scouts earlier, he said. Ronan frowned. Maybe. The warrior studied him carefully, then said one quiet sentence. She is here. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Ronan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was already in the air. The warrior took a step forward. And inside the barn, the hidden air closed her eyes. Because everything was about to change. The silence broke like glass. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. Ronan stood in the doorway of the barn, the cold air pressing against his back, the presence of armed warriors in front of him, and the truth hanging heavy in the space between them. She is here. The words didn't need repeating. They had already done their damage. Ronan exhaled slowly. Well, he muttered, that complicates things. The lead warrior didn't react. His eyes remained fixed on Ronan, sharp, calculating, certain. Move, he said again. Ronan didn't. Behind the soldiers, the war drums grew louder. No longer distant. Now they rolled across the village itself, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Windows rattled. Horses in nearby stables began to stir nervously. Voices echoed from the village center as people gathered, confused and afraid. Something much bigger was arriving. The warrior stepped closer. You will not stop what comes next. Ronan crossed his arms. Wasn't planning to stop it. Then move. Ronan held his ground. For a moment, it looked like the warrior might simply push past him. Then, a voice came from inside the barn. Enough. Everything stopped. Every soldier. Every movement. Even the drums seemed to fade for a single breath. Ronan turned. Zara stepped out from the shadows. The hay fell away behind her as she moved forward, her posture steady despite the clear pain in her side. The blanket slipped slightly from her shoulders, revealing the bandage beneath and the broken armor she still wore. But none of that mattered, because the moment the soldiers saw her, everything changed. The warriors dropped to one knee. All of them. At once. My heir, the dark-armored commander said, bowing his head. The others followed immediately. Steel touched dirt. The entire group knelt in silence. Ronan blinked. Well, he said quietly, that's new. Zara ignored him. Her eyes moved across the kneeling warriors, calm, controlled, commanding. You took your time, she said. The commander lifted his head slightly. We searched every road, every valley, he replied. When we found the ambush site, we believed you had fallen. I did not. We see that now. The drums grew louder. Closer. The ground began to tremble more noticeably. Ronan turned toward the road, and what he saw made him pause. Torches. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. An army was entering the valley. Rows of soldiers stretching far beyond the edge of the village, war banners rising above them like a storm of iron and fire. The drums weren't just sound. They were a signal. The entire force was arriving. That's a lot of people, Ronan muttered. The commander stood now. The Iron Legions, he said. Ronan nodded slowly. Of course they are. Zara stepped forward slightly. They believe I am dead, she said. The commander's voice hardened. Then we will correct that mistake. She shook her head. No. Silence. We will not reveal it yet, she continued. Ronan raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a plan I'm involved in. Zara glanced at him. You are. The commander's gaze shifted to Ronan. This human. He protected me, Zara said. The warriors studied him carefully. He hid you from us. Yes. He lied to soldiers of the Iron Throne. Zara's voice remained calm. And yet I stand here alive. Silence again. Then the commander nodded. Then he will not be harmed. Ronan exhaled. Well, he said, that's good news. But the drums outside grew louder. The army was still coming. And the village was now standing in its path. The war drums didn't stop. They rolled through the valley like thunder, echoing between the hills and shaking the village down to its foundations. By now, the entire settlement had gathered near the road. Farmers, traders, children, all staring in silent fear as the Iron Legions filled the horizon. Ronan stood just outside his barn, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. Yeah, he muttered. This got out of hand. Behind him, Zara remained calm. Despite the injury, despite the army, she stood like someone who belonged in the middle of it. Because she did. The commander, tall, scarred, and still carrying that heavy presence, stepped forward again. His eyes moved from Zara to Ronan, studying him more carefully now. You hid her, he said. Ronan shrugged. Barn was available. You lied to my soldiers. Technically, yes. You stood between us and the heir of the Iron Throne. Ronan nodded slightly. That part sounds worse when you say it like that. A few of the nearby warriors shifted at that. Not quite laughter, but close. The commander did not react. Instead, he stepped closer. You are either very brave. He paused. Or very foolish. Ronan thought about it. Probably both. The commander studied him for a long moment. Humans do not act like this. Ronan tilted his head. Like what? Protecting an enemy. Maybe I'm bad at following rules. The warrior's eyes narrowed slightly. For generations, your kind and mine have fought. Yeah. Blood has been spilled. Also yeah. And yet you chose to protect her. Ronan shrugged. She was bleeding in my barn. Silence. The simplicity of the answer seemed to catch even the hardened warriors off guard. The commander crossed his arms. Warriors of the Iron Throne do not trust words. Ronan sighed. Here we go. You must prove your intent. Of course I do. The tension in the air tightened again. Villagers nearby whispered nervously, unsure whether they were about to witness a reward or an execution. Zara stepped forward. That will not be necessary. The commander didn't look at her. The legions will question him. Then they will question me. That stopped him. Slowly, he turned toward her. My heir. My word is enough, she said. Silence. Heavy. Final. But the commander wasn't done. He turned back to Ronan one last time. If you stand beside her. He paused. You stand in war. Ronan looked past him at the army. Thousands of soldiers. Weapons. Banners. Power. Then he looked back at Zara. Then at his barn. His fields. His life. Yeah, he said quietly. I figured. The commander studied him. You can still walk away. Ronan scratched the back of his neck. Feels like that moment passed a while ago. Zara's eyes flicked toward him. For a brief second. There was something there. Respect. The commander nodded slowly. Then understand this. Ronan raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You are no longer just a farmer. Ronan sighed. Yeah, he muttered. I was afraid of that. The village stood on the edge of something it could not understand. War drums echoed across the valley. The Iron Legions filled the horizon. And in the center of it all stood a single barn and a farmer who had made one impossible choice. Ronan looked out at the army again. Thousands of warriors. All of them here for one person. The same person who had stumbled into his barn in the middle of the night, bleeding and hunted. Well, he muttered, this is definitely not normal. Behind him, The villagers had begun gathering in larger numbers. Fear spread quickly through them. Whispers, worried glances, quiet panic. Why are they here? Are we under attack? What do they want? Mayor Eldrick pushed his way through the crowd, his face pale as he approached Ronan. What have you done? The old man whispered. Ronan sighed. That's a long story. The mayor looked past him, at Zara, at the soldiers kneeling, at the army beyond the fields. His expression changed instantly. That's not just any orc, he said. No, Ronan replied. The commander stepped forward again. This village stands at a crossroads, he said. His voice carried across the crowd. Every villager fell silent. If harm had come to the heir of the Iron Throne. He paused. This place would already be burning. A wave of fear moved through the people. Ronan rubbed his face. Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme tonight. Zara stepped forward. My people will not harm this village, she said calmly. The commander nodded. As long as she stands. The meaning was clear. As long as she lived. As long as she was protected. As long as nothing changed. Ronan looked around slowly. At the people he had known his entire life. Neighbors. Friends. The quiet world he had always lived in. Now standing one wrong move away from destruction. Zara turned toward him. You can still end this, she said quietly. Ronan raised an eyebrow. How? Step away. He frowned. That's it. Yes. You leave. My army leaves. And everything goes back to normal. Yes. Ronan looked at her carefully. And if I don't? Her voice didn't change. Then you stand with me. He nodded slowly. And that means war. Yes. The drums echoed again. Louder. Closer. Ronan looked back at the village. At the fear in their eyes. At the weight of what his decision meant. He could end it. Right now. One step back. One moment of silence. And this entire storm would pass them by. Or he could stay and become part of something much bigger. Much more dangerous. Ronan let out a long breath. You know, he said, I used to worry about things like broken fences. Zara almost smiled. And now? He looked at her. Then at the army. Then back at the village. Well, he said quietly. Now I guess I'm deciding the fate of one. The drums stopped. Not all at once, but slowly, like a storm losing its strength. One by one, the deep echoes across the valley faded until only the wind remained, brushing softly through the fields as if nothing had ever happened. Ronan stood where he was, looking out at the army that had nearly swallowed his village whole. Thousands of warriors. Still, waiting for a single decision. He let out a slow breath. Well, he muttered, no pressure. Behind him, the villagers watched in silence. Fear had not left their faces, but something else had taken its place now. Hope. Uncertain. Fragile. But there. Zara stepped forward beside him. You can still walk away, she said quietly. Ronan glanced at her. You really like that option. It is the safest one. For who? For everyone. Ronan nodded slowly. Yeah. He looked at the village again. The crooked fences. The worn-out fields. The small homes that had never known war. Then he looked back at the army. At the banners. At the power waiting just beyond his land. You know, he said, I don't think this was ever about safety. Zara didn't respond. He turned fully toward her. You walked into my barn half dead, he continued. You didn't look like a war. She held his gaze. You were. He shrugged. Didn't feel like it. The wind moved through the valley. Soft. Quiet. Like the world itself was waiting. Then Ronan made his choice. He stepped forward. Not away. Not back. Forward. Toward her. Toward the army. Toward everything that came with it. Well, he said, guess I'm not walking away. A faint smile touched Zara's lips. The kind that didn't need word. Behind them, the commander stepped forward. You choose to stand with the Iron Throne. Ronan nodded. Looks like it. The warriors studied him for a moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. As you stand, so does the throne. The soldiers behind him followed. One by one. Then in waves. Thousands of warriors lowering themselves in unison. Not to Ronan, but to the moment. To the decision that had just changed everything. Ronan blinked. That's still weird. Zara raised her hand. The army rose. The drums did not return, because they were no longer needed. The war that should have begun here didn't. Not today. The army turned. Not toward the village, but away from it. Back toward the horizon. Back toward whatever conflict waited beyond. And just like that, the storm passed. Ronan stood there for a long moment, watching them disappear into the distance. The valley slowly returned to silence. The villagers began to breathe again, to move, to speak, to live. Tomas walked up beside him, shaking his head. "You hid an orc in your barn," he said. Ronan nodded. "Yeah, that orc turned out to be whatever that was." "Also, yeah, and an entire army showed up because of it." Ronan sighed. "Yep." Tomas looked at him. "You're never going to have a normal life again, are you?" Ronan thought about that, then shrugged. "Probably not." Years later, the story would spread far beyond the village. Across kingdoms, across borders, across generations. The story of a simple farmer, a hunted orc, and a single night that almost started a war. They would call it many things. Luck, fate, madness. But most would remember it as one simple truth. The night a man opened his barn door and stopped a war